Coronavirus and debt. With mail volume cut back drastically these days, the Postal Service is asking Congress for an $89 billion bailout. President Trump and congressional Republicans are saying no way. So what does that spell for the future of the Postal Service? Let's talk about it with Ross Marchand, Policy Director at the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Ross, bailing out the Postal Service, good idea or bad?
Terrible idea, especially with no strings attached. USPS is supposed to lose $13 billion this year. They're asking for $89 billion. That makes absolutely no sense at all.
A lot has been said in the past about some of the requirements put upon the Postal Service. One of them is that they have to, I believe back in 2006, they had to pre-fund medical expenses for retirees. They had to put all that money aside, and that's one of the reasons the Postal Service says no other government agency, or which not necessarily is a government agency, but really you're not seeing that requirement put on other similar entities, and that's one of the reasons they're in the predicament. Then you throw into a fact that they're dealing with mail volume way down these days.
Yeah, and USPS leadership has been talking about this retirement fund stuff for years. But the truth of the matter is they're losing a lot of money in their own right. Even just taking that question, that retirement fund question, out of the equation, they're still losing more than $3 billion a year. That's billion with a B. So clearly that cannot be all of the explanation.
So what do you think one of the reasons is they keep going back to the till? I mean, one of the key points that you hear the Postal Service say is we don't take taxpayer money. We do not operate with taxpayer money. We operate by way of postage and other methods in which we raise money on our own right. So what do you do? I mean, how do you enact some sort of reform if the interest here is to keep the Postal Service afloat?
Well, again, this is something that Postal Service leadership has been talking about for years, but it's not quite true. Taxpayers have been funding USPS to the tune of more than $3 billion for years and years and years. So the question is, what can we do? Well, Congress has a lot of leverage here, and they could force the USPS to pursue better management policies, to not always overspend on bloated contracts, for example, and to open up their books and show how they're pricing their products. And until that happens, the Postal Service is always going to be in the red.
If you talk to Democrats, because this has predictably become a partisan issue, one of the key lines that we're hearing is that this is really an effort to just force privatization, is to take the Postal Service and, take chunks of it, give it to UPS, give it to FedEx, give it to other companies, get the government out of this business altogether. Is it as cut and dry as that?
Absolutely not. And no one, and I repeat, no one benefits from privatization. A lot of these rural routes run by the Postal Service would be unprofitable anyway. What is in everyone's best interest is not privatization, it's reform that could save taxpayers from a very expensive bailout.
It's funny because when you first came on our radar, our friend Stephen Kent, who handles booking for a lot of our guests, and he said, we got this guy named Ross who was just fascinated with the inner workings of the Postal Service. And that's why when
one issue.
When this story broke, I said, I know the guy I got to call. But why is it, seriously, for you, for a wonk, why is this predicament, this situation, what makes this more unique than anything else we've seen in bureaucracy?
This is something where these services impact hundreds of millions of Americans. Postal Service is one of the few agencies that touches pretty much all American households on a daily basis. So we have to get this right, and we cannot let the Postal Service slide itself into further debt and mismanagement.
And one other thing before we let you go is another talking point that's popped up over the last couple of weeks, this push to get more people to vote by mail. There has been a lot of emphasis on states conducting their elections because clearly there's a concern right now about the coronavirus and whatnot. That would not necessarily be something that would be conducive to a Postal Service that may not get the help it seems to need between now and November.
Well, it needs help. It needs a lot of assistance for that to happen, but it also needs to get its management in order for it to competently carry out that operation. So those two things are very important.
All right. Ross, good to see you, my friend.
Thanks.
And I'm sure this is a story that we will probably talk with you again because, again, you're our go-to when it comes to the Postal Service. Final Five comes back right after this.
Stay tuned.